Oswego, a typical small town in central New York home to numerous family businesses, annual festivities, and a gorgeous view of Lake Ontario. Beneath the layers of small town appeal lies a darker side to Oswego. Every town has its own folklore and stories passed down from one generation to the next. Though some may have started out as just scary stories to tell in the dark, every story holds a kernel of truth. Ghost stories in particular are not uncommon to the locals in Oswego. Tales such as the hauntings at the fort that dates back to the Revolutionary War and the Tonkin House are stories everyone seems to know. However, one site remains infamous above all others: Grey Road. Though everyone seems to have different stories as to why they believe the road is haunted, the general consensus is that there is something undeniably eerie about it. A local resident who published his own story online had this to say about Grey Road.
I grew up in a small town in Monetto, New York in the 1970s. One day while running with my family, my father turned down this road he considered a shortcut. It was Grey Road, a road that had two houses on it that traveled through the darkest part of the woods. When I was older, my father confessed to me that my mother and he used to park there while dating, like many other young couples did. Anyway, as we neared the end of the road, there was an old set of railroad tracks that stuck up high. To cross, you had to go real slow. While on the tracks, I looked out the window and saw a girl in a black dress. She had no face. When I told my parents, they looked at me kind of funny and said, "You saw the ghost." At the time, I was only 5 and I had no idea what they were talking about. As I grew older, I was fascinated with seeing the ghost again. When I was 12, I finally asked my parents about the ghost. They told me the story about how in the 1940s or 50s, a young couple were parking in the road and had parked too close to the tracks. The story goes that their car was hit by a train and the female had died. The story continues with people seeing her looking for her young lover, and sometimes you can hear her moan and call out for him.
Out of the multitudes of stories, this seems to be the most popular. The story varies. Some versions include a young boy, sometimes an old man, and even a little girl that decided to play on the railroad tracks that cut through the road.
As to if the road's really haunted or not, I'm somewhere caught between a believer and a skeptic myself, because you hear just various rumors of deaths that have happened on the road in the past and other people's experiences of just creepy happenings. But I think part of what makes it so creepy for people is just the setting. It's a long, isolated road. It's dark. There aren't many lights on it. You got like abandoned railroad tracks, a swamp, and creepy forest surroundings. You have a cornfield. It's basically waiting to be made into a horror movie.
In the daytime, especially during the winter, the road doesn't look nearly as sinister. However, the cold does not stop Grey Road from acting up at night. Connor recalls an incident that occurred last winter while he was driving with some friends.
Some friends and I were driving down the road late at night just for kicks and giggles, and it just so happened that our car stalled out about 0.4 miles from one of the entrances to the road. And that really stood out to me, not only because it was creepy, but because another filmmaker and I were planning on doing a documentary on Grey Road. So we had done some research, and among various actual deaths that have happened, one really stood out, and it was the death of a cab driver on the road. He was shot by his passenger, and coincidentally, it happened about 0.4 miles from that end of the road. And I was doing that research after the car stalled out, so this eerie feeling crept over me. And so we went back and measured, and it was that distance. So it was really creepy.
Spurred on by the many stories I had heard, I did some research to see if any of them held any merit. One news article from an old issue of the Pal Times, a local newspaper, dated August 10th, 1961, reported a confessed homicide of the taxi driver from a nearby city.
So, as to if there are actually ghosts on Grey Road, I'm not sure if it's haunted by spirits, but it is definitely haunted by word of mouth. All these rumors kind of give it a life of its own. And I think that really has an impact on people when they drive.
Where some remain skeptical, other locals are entirely convinced that there is something amiss about Grey Road. What other true accounts could be out there to outline a dark past for the road and prove believers right? All myths had to be started somewhere, but the full truth behind the origin of the many ghost stories may never be known. The shady past, the timeless folklores, and the thrill of the ghastly encounter maintain Grey Road's reputation as a dark local attraction.